Good morning, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And just for anyone who's new, we will go through the technical assistance slide again. Essentially, what we do for this meeting, it's a public meeting, so we generally mute all participants upon entry and enable audio for participants during the public comment period of this hearing. And we ask people, in notifying the public about the meeting, we ask people to sign up for making public comment in advance. And Francis, has anyone signed up?
No.
Okay. And usually during that comment period, we typically call on people in order that they're registered, and we do allow people to register during the meeting. So, and let's see, where am I? Okay, call participants in order they've registered. Right. And then you're asked to sign up. During the meeting, you may use the chat and or texting option to sign up. Please, if you're using the chat, drop your name into the chat and let us know you'd like to offer a comment. And then for people who are on the phone, you can text your name and affiliation to the number listed, which is 646-763-2189 to offer public comment. And during the last half hour, we will enable the audio and call on people in the order that we received your registering for comment. So first we'll call on the people who put their names into chat, and then call on the text list of people after that. And so today, since our meeting is from now until 1, we'd like to ask if you'd want to offer comment, please sign up by 12 p.m. And I'm going to now move into attendance. I call your name, and so if you're here, just say here, and otherwise we will keep going. So Chuck Apelian, I know he texted me to say he may be running a little late. I'm not sure if he's here yet. Murad Awade.
I'm here.
Okay, great. Sorry, Eve Barron.
I'm here.
Holly Bonner. Amy Breedlove.
I'm here, thank you.
Mark Diller.
I'm here, thank you.
Natalie DeVito. Donna Gill. Anthony Harmon. Jose Hernandez. Michael Nussbaum.
Present.
Lillian Perez.
I'm here.
Okay, awesome. Aneta Sicharan. Anastasia Samosa.
I'm here.
Okay, great. All right. So my name is Sarah Said, and I am the chair and executive director. For those who are here for the first time, again, welcome. And our first order of business is to review and approve our minutes from the last meeting. Did everyone here get the minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Great. All in favor of approving the minutes from January?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, so the minutes are approved. Thank you very much for that. And now we have a lot of, we didn't meet for 2 months, so we're gonna give you updates on what we've been up to, so you're aware of how we've been out there in investing in community engagement and civic engagement. So our first update is related to Civics Weeks, which just passed, and I'm going to turn it over to Laura, who you met last time, to take us through the Civics Week update and tell us what we did.
Thank you so much. Great to see everyone, and I'm looking forward to the next in-person meeting, hopefully soon. Yes, so as Dr. Saeed mentioned, and as I think we had shared previously, the week of March 7th was our annual, excuse me, Civics Week, which the Department of Education leads as part of its Civics for All curriculum and initiative, which is a year-round project. But Civics Week is a really special celebration in all public schools throughout the city, elementary through high school, where schools and students come together to do a variety of things. And a few highlights from this past year, which was really especially special because it was the first time that we were back in person for Civics Week since before the pandemic. The last Civics Week in person was actually the week of, I believe it was March 3rd, 2020. So we were in person. We were, just about a week away from entering lockdown and 2 weeks from the schools being closed. Last year was entirely virtual. So it was great to be back inside schools, seeing students and teachers and staff in person. And some of the things that we did included a student voter registration drive in high schools. This is something that was led by the mayor's public engagement unit with our support. PEU staff and CEC staff were in 22 high schools in every borough. And we registered and pre-registered high school students. As you know, people who are eligible can actually pre-register at 16 or 17. And then when they turn 18, they're automatically added to the voter rolls. So this is a great way to try to engage people even before they're 18, get them registered and talk about the importance of voting. And we don't have our final numbers yet, but based on our last report, we have more than 13,000 high school students that were pre-registered or registered as part of that drive during Civics Week. And then we also, DOE also ran a participatory budgeting in your school vote at schools throughout the city during Civics Week. And there were visits from elected officials, from both of the major political parties across the boroughs. We had, I meant to mention this at the outset, our kickoff, which is, I think, in that picture in the PowerPoint, was at Grover Cleveland High School in Queens. And we had, they were just absolutely wonderful hosts. And one of the highlights of that was that we partnered with NYC Speaks, which is the new initiative from the mayor's office that's been they conducted the big citywide survey earlier this year, and now they're going into the next phase of what they're calling community conversations. So we actually had community conversation with NYC Speaks at Grover Cleveland High School with students, addressing issues of criminal justice, housing, and mental health. And those were some of the issues that in the survey had really risen to the top of being important to young people. So it was a really great week, and happy to answer questions in the way that Dr. Saeed described, and already excited for next year's SVRD and Civics Week.
Thank you, Laura. Do the commissioners have any questions or feedback or on this segment?
I'll jump in if it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
go
that's
after
fine.
Mark.
Yeah. Mark.
Just that having been a presenter at one of the pre-COVID Civics Week's presentations, it's a terrific effort. I'm glad that we're keeping it alive. I'm especially glad it's in person. And keep us in mind for next year, because it's something that I recommend to my colleagues and would love to be a part of myself. Thanks.
That's so great that you brought that up. Thank you so much. Were you there as in your capacity as a community board chair or
I think I was there as there was no formal
okay.
invitation. I think I
Yeah.
was there as a local community troublemaker and
Oh,
a former PTA president. Truthfully, I think that's how I got invited to the dance.
that's
Um,
wonderful.
but there was a broad group of folks from PTAs, from the community board, from the community education council, and then
Okay.
just the usual suspects.
Okay. That's really helpful. We will definitely make sure that we invite commissioners to be a part of that um, going forward.
I have a comment and a question.
Yeah, Lillian.
Hi, Laura. Great to see you.
I see you.
Congratulations. This is amazing. I think that we need to do a lot more to engage folks the minute they're eligible. And it's great to know that you're getting them even before they become eligible. So great work. I'm wondering, have you really been able to penetrate all of the high schools, or is that a plan? I know it's a lot of work, but I'd like sort of equal access everywhere. Give everyone should get the same level of opportunity. And if the answer is no, can we try to do that through PTA meetings or other civic engagement classes, etc.?
Thank you so much. That's a great question. What DOE does is they reach out to the leadership of every high school to ask, I mean, to basically, make sure principals and leadership are aware that Civics Week is happening, and they have these materials that they send to every school so that schools can conduct Civics Week activities and do registration drives. Um, I I would personally love to see more people from the city going into schools. As I mentioned, we were only able to be in 22 schools this year, which was a little bit lower than the number in 2020. I think, we're sort of obviously the schools are still kind of emerging from slash dealing with the pandemic. So there was some hesitancy to really just fully widen the program this year. But I think given how successful it was, hopefully we can expand next year and partner with other city agencies to encourage people to volunteer. Obviously, I'd love for commissioners to volunteer if you're interested, and try to make arrangements to be in more schools. And to your point, really be more mindful about which schools we're going to, because it was a little bit, my understanding is that it was a little bit of a self-selection system where, a call went out and schools volunteered. But to your point, I think we should be more proactive and saying, which schools really would benefit the most from this type of partnership.
Correct.
So,
It's
yeah,
usually the ones that need it the most that stay quiet because they're busy doing so many other challenging things, right? So, to that point, maybe we look at the data of where communities, um, communities that have the lowest civic engagement and participation. And maybe that's what we should be going. And not to call anybody out, but communities like the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side may not be the communities that need it the most, but because of how active their communities and parents are, they may be the first ones raising their hands.
right.
Leaving other communities that really, really need it, but may not even have the time to read the email on time, without the opportunity to engage.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm really hoping we can do more of that and be more proactive for
Can I
next
jump?
year.
Agree. I
Can I
volunteered
jump in real quick?
to help next year.
Thank you.
Murad.
So, Student Voter Registration Day, which ended up becoming like sort of Student Voter Registration Week, started as like a pilot initiative many years ago, which the NYC was co-leading with the city council, and then we just took it over. And then our goal was always to get the city to actually have this implemented across every single high school. And that was the goal. And I'm happy that the city is moving towards that. I think the piece here from Lessons Learned, because this is one of the programs that I was actually managing at the time a couple years ago, is that the schools that Lillian was talking about actually need targeted outreach. And the way that we did it was we didn't partner with city agencies. We partnered with community-based organizations who we prepared with materials. We gave them, you know, everything that they needed to present, including a deck, and then making the deck as like culturally relevant as possible to young people. And for those who don't have status at the time, we had included other methods of how they can be civically engaged, including like community boards or, you know, uh, CECs or whatever it is. So I'm wondering if like the curriculum has changed, and if not, it'd be great to see it. And then the second piece is, I really do think the city should pick up the partnerships with community-based organizations because they also have connections with the local schools, and they're working with the schools anyway. So this is a great way to continue to further their partnership, but also give the city additional capacity to actually be in every school on that day.
Yes, I 100% agree. And thank you so much for sharing that history. Um, I know that in the past, as you said, there have been partnerships with CBOs, and this year there were groups, non-government groups that went into schools, but it wasn't really coordinated. For example, I know that Dominicanos went to a school. I believe the League of Women Voters was in some schools, but I totally agree. I mean, this is a huge resource that we need to tap into. My understanding was that because of the COVID policies, including the vaccination requirement to enter school buildings, that DOE did not want us to partner with external groups this year. But I'm really, really hopeful that that will change going forward and that we can really, spend the early weeks of the winter recruiting a very wide volunteer base. And as Lillian was saying, really engage with schools early on to make sure they know it's coming. It also always happens very shortly after that February midwinter break. And so, there's just I think this past year was a really successful week, but there were definitely a lot of lessons learned. And to your point about the curriculum, first of all, I'm happy to, share that with the commission, with any of the commissioners who are interested. And we do always try to include other examples of ways that students can be civically engaged besides voting. But we welcome any and all suggestions for what to add. I know in 2020, for example, there was a lot of emphasis on the census. This year, there was a lot about participatory budgeting, but would really love everyone's thoughts on what else should be included and really how to make these lessons relevant to students.
Okay, thanks so much. Anyone else? Did I hear?
Was that
Sarah,
a request
Jill.
for input on how to make it relevant to students?
Yeah,
Or
I
is it
mean, and I
offline?
don't know if I defer to Dr. Said on whether we want to do that now, or what I was thinking is that maybe since the next Civics Week is a ways away, we could potentially have sort of a meeting specifically on that at some point. But defer to the group about the best way to proceed there.
Whatever you guys decide is fine. I'm happy to speak to you offline and one-on-one on that. Uh, the one that I took part in actually was at a middle school, and there were some lessons learned there. It was, I think, very successful. And anyway, hyperlocal is the headline. And glad to talk to you offline about how whatever I can do that would be useful.
That's really great. I think maybe, Laura, what we could do is share the curriculum and figure out a time to meet with whoever's interested to talk more in depth about it. I think that would be a great conversation to have. Just to keep us on time with the getting through the rest of the items. And I know um, the next focus is on the participatory budgeting update, so maybe we could go to that because I believe Wendy also has to leave at noon for another meeting. So Wendy Trull, our senior advisor, will go through some of the updates on PB and where we are with that.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, all. Appreciate the opportunity to brief you all on the status of the process we're running this year and our thoughts for planning for the year ahead. So I don't know who's controlling the slides. Great. So just in terms of wrapping up the voting phase, the voting period ended in February. We had a total of 33 ballots, and we translated them into a variety of languages, included those listed here: Spanish, Arabic, Punjabi, Korean, Chinese, Polish, Russian, French, Haitian Creole, Urdu, Bengali, Wolof, Uzbek, Farsi, and Hindi. We made sure to reach out to all of the organizations working in their communities to capture languages, additional languages apart from those that we tend to automatically translate into. We also worked with the community-based organizations to run over 19 Get Out the Vote events with the organizations and volunteers and folks from other city agencies, including the Public Engagement Unit in all 5 boroughs. Had over 100 volunteers, including the staff from the organizations running the process, as well as city folks. So we got just under 30,000 votes. We think that's especially good because we were in the midst of a second COVID surge. Extremely cold weather, as I can attest. Being out there and canvassing in 12-degree weather was challenging, keeping all of our flyers on the table when the wind blows. But it was great. We managed to go forward and have a lot of canvassing efforts despite the challenges, and the TNCs were great. A lot of young people involved, a lot of residents involved. The voting breakdown, the highest votes were received from the Bronx, then Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Staten Island. The top issues, the projects were focused on hunger. So we had 3 projects that are now we're moving into the implementation phase. So there are 3 projects that are addressing hunger, 14 projects addressing mental health, 6 projects addressing reduction of gun violence, and 10 programs that are youth program specific. So we have over 30 projects that folks are now in the process of implementing. The expectation is those projects will be fully implemented by the end of the year. We're really looking forward to reporting back on the results of those projects. We did have a couple organizations actually team up and share a ballot and join forces to implement a project together. So that's kind of where we are. Again, just as a reminder, I know we've been presenting on this pretty regularly, but this is the $1.3 million process focused on the neighborhoods hardest hit by COVID. The 33 tree neighborhoods. Any questions before I move on? And again, if you're interested in seeing the specific projects, when you get the deck, you'll see the full list of all of the projects and the organizations implementing on our platform.
Chuck, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. What specifically were they asking? I'm curious on the mental health projects, because that's a big area and probably a lot of different ideas.
The topic itself was really broad, and so folks had the opportunity to develop projects that they thought were specific to their own communities. And
Right.
So the organizations were tasked with working with residents and their coalition members to design those projects. So you can see the actual projects on the ballot itself and the project that won.
But an example of some of what they were asking for, that's what I'm trying to get at. What was some of the ideas of what they wanted to do to, help with mental health?
So it's a variety of things. Again, I think when people surfaced issues about mental health, they were pretty broad ranging. We'd have to go back and kind of look at the data for what specific issues emerged. But go ahead, Sarah.
No, I just dropped a link into the chat that tells you the winning projects anyway, and some of based on what I'm seeing here is like mental health stressors associated with gun violence. There's a health fair, mental health fair, coping with isolation, depression for youth. It was like different wellness month. So there's like different ideas that people came up with.
Okay, thank you.
Wendy, thank you for this. This is great. And also great to see the participation of Bronx and Queens in this. Just wondering, this is Get Out the Vote specifically for the PB initiative. Is that correct?
Correct.
I'm just wondering, Dr. Said, is there a way that we can combine some of our efforts? This is also a great time to sign up in Laura's project, getting voters signed up to vote in the elections in New York City. And they seem to be engaged if they're voting in this. So I think it's an opportunity. The other thing is we talked previously about you only have to be 16 to serve on the community boards. So also getting that information out. I just think it's a really great idea to be a little less siloed and try and do some of these initiatives that work together, try and get those synergies out there when we can.
Really great point.
Could I jump in too?
Yeah.
Thanks. So individual council members are also in a hurried process for PB because obviously they took office in January and the voting typically takes place, sort of now-ish. It's like usually the first week in April. I'm hoping that whatever lessons are learned about outreach in the 33 communities that were a part of this initiative will be shared with the council members in those districts who are probably trying to get a turnout for a second wave of PB, assuming that they're participating. And my understanding is that a lot of them are. So cross-pollinating, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a reminder, I think we did brief you all earlier, but we are hosting the city council participatory budgeting process on our platform. So we do have sort of a connection there, both in terms of how the platform is functioning so that we can be working together to identify, any stumbling blocks or issues. But I appreciate elevating that conversation as well for what all of the things that need to happen that occur offline, including canvassing. So we'd be happy to share what we've learned in that setting. They are convening kind of regularly, the folks who are participating, the city council staffers. We have 14, there are 14, I believe 14 city council districts that are running PB, and one that won't be participating in a voting phase, but use the platform to generate ideas.
And are there any other questions? I'm not able to see everyone on my screen, so feel free to speak up if you have a question. Okay, I think you could keep moving, Wendy.
Great, thank you. We are also using this particular experience and process as an opportunity to gain to elevate awareness about participatory budgeting, what it is. Really excited to have 33 neighborhoods engaged in the process, having organizations who now know about it, residents who've heard of it. We got some press hits in Ebony and Harlem World, and then there's also an article here about some of the city council members who are continuing to implement PB, even though many aren't, and they're still, considering working with City Council Central to continue the supports that they have, hopefully in the next year. So good to see that PB is alive and well and operating in the way that it is, both at the City Council level and in the 33 tree neighborhoods. As part of building awareness, we're also working on a storytelling project. We're trying to think of, multimodal ways of getting people excited about it, telling the story, what it feels like for organizations to be working in this way with residents. And so we're working with our youth fellows that we have on board with us, supporting participatory budgeting and supporting the civic engagement. And the idea is to create several mini documentaries that profile the process and the experience of both the organizations running it and their residents in their communities to help build awareness. The youth fellows are helping to take the lead and have conducted interviews with the organizations, and then our artists and residents will be working with both the organizations and our youth fellows to produce a final product. Those can be on our site, those can be shared around. Again, I think it's different to hear from people you know, you can put something on the website, but I think having something very visual, hearing stories, having folks talk about it from their perspective, I think is very powerful. And I did want to just share a couple snippets, a little preview of some of the content that will likely, you know, be woven into this storytelling project of what we're hearing from organizations and sort of what their experience has been thus far in response to the question, what is their hope for participatory budgeting and the future of democracy? We're hearing they want to see more training, more youth training on democracy. They want to go another year. They want it to be bigger. They want to grow. They want more funds for PB to be taught in high schools, which it is currently, and they're expanding, which is great. So we're really looking to make those connections with the Department of Education and think about our pipeline to leadership and civic engagement leadership in the city. A call for it to be available to all communities, for it to leave a legacy, and then responses to the impact that it's had in their community. Folks are talking about how it's really allowed them to do what they're doing and do it a little more deeply, particularly one project related to hunger, really feeling like they were able to address something very specific in a way that they had not been able to. The creativity of it. I love this quote personally. It's ignited the idea that there is a way for communities. Sorry, I'll get to that quote in a minute, Francis. It's ignited, previous slide. Sorry, for communities to participate in city initiatives, improving the quality in the neighborhood, and the way in which I think people are feeling they're able to engage with residents has been really meaningful, to have that engagement at a deeper level where they're really involving residents at the ground level in what they're building towards. And here's the quote. Again, I just think this is sort of inspiring, helps keep us keep our heads in it when we're in our challenging moments. But I'll just share this quote with you from one of our organizations implementing participatory budgeting in Queens. Something that was reinforced that I continue to learn because I've been working with this community for a couple of years now. It's just the desire to really participate in things like this. There's this hunger to participate, and now we have families reaching out to us saying, hey, what project was chosen? When is this going to start? How can we become a part of this? Where can we volunteer? And reinforces the idea that our communities are very much interested in being involved if we just allow them the space. So again, you'll see a fuller set of these themes and conversations and feedback in the final product, which we are working to have ready before we move towards next year. And then moving towards citywide PB, which is really exciting. As we've shared, we have money to run a citywide participatory budgeting process. It will be expense. Just as a reminder, we have about $5 million to implement projects citywide. So starting in July, we'll be running a citywide, and we'll be able to fulfill our charter mandate and involve all New Yorkers. We do want to, based on what we've done over the past year, we don't want to lose that lens where we have an equity-based focus and we are really concentrating our investments in neighborhoods hardest hit by COVID. We do want to maintain that. I just want to give you a very high-level timeline of kind of what the pre-planning work that is involved and how the process will run next year. I'm really excited, for one, and I think our team is as well, to have a full year to run the process as opposed to what we've done over the past 2 years, which is to run the process and implement the projects all in the same year. It's just been very challenging. We've done it, but it really allows us to step back a bit, really bring in stakeholders, do a lot of engagement, and really be sort of mindful about all of the lessons learned. So this next month and the following, we're going to be having a series of conversations with our stakeholders, which I can talk a bit about in a minute. We're going to be taking that feedback, revising our plans so that our goal is to get a full plan in front of all of you by July. And then beginning next fiscal year, we'll have our idea generation phase take place at the end of the summer into early fall. We'll start creating the ballots by November. We'll be working on ensuring we have organizations to implement those projects, preparing the ballot and translating them. We need a time to do that so we can do it well and make sure we have the quality translations. And we are anticipating have a fairly long vote period. We've learned that just kind of getting the word out is really important. It sometimes takes a little bit of time, and we want to allow for that to ensure there's as much participation as possible. So that's, again, just a high-level overview of the timeline. from now until next year. In terms of next steps and planning, the stakeholder engagement process that I mentioned that we're focused on over the next 2 months, we are also working with NYC Speaks in the next phase, which is facilitating conversations with communities. We are using that as an opportunity for us to have conversations as well about what people would like to see happen in the participatory budgeting space next year. So there are questions that we have devised that are related to specifically to PB that will be folded into the civic engagement module, which is one of the policy areas. So folks will be picking up that conversation. We're also going to be coordinating to ensure that we have our high priority demographics represented, to ensure we're having conversations with seniors, people with disabilities, veterans, immigrants, NYCHA residents, and those who are involved in the justice system. We are going to have a youth session with our youth fellows and invite in other youth. We're planning that for April 2nd. And then also a special invitation from City Hall. If any of you all would like to host a community conversation in your own community, you are encouraged and welcome to do so. There's an email here if you're interested in doing that. You can reach out directly to my colleague Harthi Kohli at City Hall. So again, I don't think that that's necessarily something that's open generally, but understanding that this is an important group to civic engagement and the work that we're doing, that is an invitation open to all of you to host a conversation. We are going to be convening our first intergovernmental working group. We think this is really important because sometimes some of the challenges have to do with the way the city functions, the way the city operates, but also a lot of the good work that happens is a result of the partnerships that we've built with city agencies that work with seniors, with youth, DYCD, DIFTA. So we're pulling that group together. There's nothing like getting people in a room to brainstorm and think about all of the opportunities and the work. So that will be taking place next Monday. And we're going to be working through some key decision points that we'd appreciate their input on, having to do with like thinking through data sources, allocation methodology, outreach strategy. And then we're going to be reconvening our participatory budgeting advisory group made up of community members in April. Just for awareness, we are recruiting new members. We had some fall off, and then we were aware that we needed to make sure that we had certain demographics represented. So we are working to get folks on board who can join us and offer that perspective. So thanks to some of you I reached out to directly with for your help. We are going to be having, again, our follow-up meetings and work group. We're having some working group sessions focused on particular issue areas related to digital divide and outreach and evaluation. Finalizing again and coming back to be prepared to present to all of you in July. And the last thing I'll just mention is that there's been a lot of interest in lowering the age, the current minimum age for participation and voting is 16. We think that there's a lot of value in considering lowering that to 11. The rationale for lowering the age in part is because the Department of Education is running such an incredible program already focused on participatory budgeting. It starts in middle school. And I think that's a really great age to get young people starting to think about civic engagement and what it means and how to have voice and how to have agency. We're working, looking to work closely with these schools and with these students to kind of create this, again, pipeline of leadership. And it would be great if those youth were able to participate in our process in their own communities beyond their schools. And the other reality is that the city council process, for the most part, has lowered their voting age as well to 11. So it'd be great to be consistent and to offer that as well. We've had this conversation with our partners on the ground who've had experience engaging, and they also agree that it's a good age. So we know we have to go through that rule change process. So I think more to come on the timeline for that. I'll turn it back over to Francis to talk more about the rulemaking process. But before I turn it back over to you, Francis, any questions on? I know I covered a lot on what I just presented.
Wendy, there was a question from Donna in the chat about the level of response. Donna, can you clarify what you were
Uh,
asking, or I don't know if you
yes,
had your question answered.
yes. Thank you, Wendy. This was amazing. The reason I asked the level of response because I know with surveys, there's usually not a big response to surveys in general. So I was just wondering about the amount of people in the different tree areas, um, just statistically wise, that responded. And if you thought that was a good response data. And that's the first question. And the second part of this question, seeing that I'm on the air, is I'm very interested in this, and I'm really interested in trying to and I'm happy to see that you're engaging a lot of the communities that don't ordinarily get involved in this, the justice involved communities, the communities with different abilities, and things like that. So that's actually very good. And I'm interested in that meeting on the 28th. Thank you, Wendy.
Great, great. We can definitely share those details with you. There are a lot of opportunities, I think, to be involved, and I'd be thrilled to involve all of you in what way feels appropriate. So I can, send a schedule of the convenings and the topics that we're covering, so you can think about how you might want to plug in. I think the other thing that I think is fun is also thinking about how we're going to plug city agencies with the participatory, it's a mouthful, participatory budgeting advisory committee, folks from the community. So we really are practicing what we preach. We're bringing folks together both in city and the communities, and kind of coming together to deliberate the deliberative process of PB from the very, very early stages, where we're thinking about the impact, we're thinking about design, we're thinking about outreach. We need to bring in these communities early on if we want to be successful and see a good participation rate. Just so I understand your question, Donna, the survey, we did issue a survey very early on as part of the tree process to help understand what some of those issue areas were. And we got, I think it was over 10,000 survey responses back, which I think wasn't too shabby, considering people feel often over surveyed. But I think we weren't trying to rely on just that survey alone, and followed up sort of what we were hearing with and tasking the organizations to have conversations with residents to kind of get underneath what was surfacing in those surveys. And again, I don't know if you're also referring to the participation rates in the vote. I think, considering it's our first year running a process of that size and having brand new partners, I think we feel pretty good about the result. Again, considering the vast majority of the participation was on paper. I think it was almost 90% paper balloting. So being able to go out and interface with communities and individuals in the middle of a COVID surge and in the middle of the holidays, and in temperatures that were really conditions that weren't great. I think overall we're pleased. I think we've learned a lot, and we definitely want to think about those lessons learned as we move forward. And that is why we need to partner really closely with so many organizations and so many demographics to make sure we get it right next year and have as much participation as possible.
Thank you, Wendy. You answered my question. I appreciate that.
Great. Absolutely. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question on the PB projects process? And I think we had said that we would share with commissioners any opportunities to join the meetings with the PBAC. Right, Wendy?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So now we're turning over to what's happening with changing the rule.
Right. So just a quick overview of the City Administrative Procedure Act. So because the age range for PB is set in the charter, we'll need to go through the rulemaking process. Just a quick reminder, the first step is for us to draft the rule, but because we also have you as commissioners, we'll need to present the rule to you in order to proceed. So our timeline, we'll cover the timeline a bit later. We're looking at May to propose the rule to you. Shortly after that, publish the rule on our website and begin that public comment period, which lasts 30 days. After that 30 days of receiving comment, we'll host the public hearing, have an opportunity to revise if needed. So then once we revise based on the feedback that we received from that public hearing, we'll publish the final rule, send that to council, send that to the speaker, and then it takes another 30 days for that rule to become final. So we're hoping to start that off and finish it early in the summer so that we're ready for the citywide PB implementation. And then just also as a reminder, during that time, we will also be revising the Polsite language assistance methodology. So we have two major revisions here. So let me, next slide. So we have two timelines that we're working with, but we hope to present the updates to the methodology and the changes to the PB age on May 24th, and then see kind of an adjustment period to see. Our hope is to have the public hearing for PB in June and then the methodology in July. So it'll be a very busy summer for us. Yes, Mark, you have your hand up.
Given that one of the natural constituencies for lowering the voting age is obviously the students themselves, and I, for one, would want to hear from them. Holding that public hearing in the summer creates obstacles to that. Is there any way to either accelerate or slow down the process so that it takes place during the regular school term when, for example, the DOE could be our partner in pushing students to comment and or their parents? I'm afraid that a July public hearing will be lost on the constituency from whom I personally would most want to hear.
Thanks for flagging that, Mark. I think we could take that back and talk with our DOE colleagues and see how to proceed on that. It's a really good flag. I actually wanted to ask the commissioners on this and maybe just take a few minutes to discuss. Were there specific sort of questions or topics within the age question that you want to hear about? What kinds of considerations would you want us to make sure we've covered, in a public comment period? We think this is, a great way to get aligned with several different processes that are happening and welcome participation from younger people. I mean, I just don't know if people have wanted to give you all the chance to say if you had any thoughts about, how we could, what kinds of pros and cons we might want to think about as we deliberate on this.
If I could jump in,
Yeah.
I would be interested in what DOE's idea. Ideally, there would be curriculum around this. There would be some guidance. Just as with adult voters, you can't always guarantee that the voters will follow the guidance, but it should at least be available to them. I think that it is an important step and a good step, and would be interested in supporting this, in that increasingly the Department of Education is not responsive in the way that some of us might like to initiatives from students and from the community. And so this is an alternative approach that could support schools in a way that the schools themselves get interested in. And so hearing from the students themselves what their views on projects would be and having them have some stake in deciding on them would be an exciting prospect. And that's one of the reasons why I would hope that we would hear from them directly in any process having to do with changing the age, and then of course in voting on it. As somebody who staffed the table of PB voting, where there were projects in a council district and had to turn away students younger than 16, it's not what we want for their view of a future in civic engagement. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else any commissioner have a comment?
I just want to, it is a comment. I guess it's
Mhm.
a question as well.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand engaging those 11 through 16 and that we're using methods that we use, normally for populations that we deal with. And I think Anetta's not on the line today, but we have discussed in the past using theater or different methods of engagement. And I just want to put forward as an idea that if we are looking at engaging 11 through 16-year-olds, I think it is a great opportunity to use different methods and
Mhm.
theater or acting out or more creative engagement as opposed to just words and signs and pamphlets.
Thank you. That's a really, really important point, and I think it probably applies across the ages. That I think we do need to think about how we're infusing this process with like creativity, and to use Yasmani's word, joy. And I think you're right, especially will be important to think about that for younger people as well. So that's really helpful. Thank you. I don't know if Wendy's still on the call, but I'll be sure to pass that along to her as well.
Yeah, I'm here, Sarah, and
Oh, great.
yeah, I love that idea, and I love hearing about what students are doing currently and how students are using as an opportunity to practice so many different skills and build so many different skills. Some kids really get into the graphic design element, and some kids love to man the voting station. And it doesn't even have to be a lot of money. The PB pot is, I think, $2,000. But just hearing, kids being excited to go to the principal. My son's middle school is actually running it this year, and they're just running to her office all the time, coming, giving ideas. So I think there is a lot of enthusiasm from that age group, and I agree we really have to be mindful of our strategies for how we're going to reach those young people. And I think there's an enormous opportunity for us to finally make that solid connection with Civics for All, the Department of Education, and align and think about how that curriculum occurs in the school and how we bring it out into the communities. And I think a theater, that's a wonderful way of thinking about it.
Thanks, Wendy, and I'm glad you're still on the line. The other thing is Mark brought up about the DOE and some of the limitations, and that is teachers are overwhelmed with what they have to do in the classroom. So if there is a way to use lunchtime, recess, as a place to engage, I think it would really be so beneficial. I know in my child's elementary school, when they have a DJ come in for lunchtime, it really makes a big difference with the engagement of the children and joy, as we've said. So these are just some ideas I wanted to put forward.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thoughts about the public hearing on the age for participation? Okay, so we will circle back about the date. What possibilities of making it earlier. I don't think we could do it later because I think we want to start the process in the summer. But we'll circle back with everybody. That. Okay, I think if, again, I don't see everyone's hands in front of me.
Dr. C, one
Yeah.
thought about that last note, because I do understand the need to move this forward and not to delay it. While it wouldn't qualify as the public hearing that would be required under the Administrative Procedures Act or whatever we call it in the city, um, uh, would it be possible to hold a pre-hearing during the term of the school year so that we could hear from students, even though it wouldn't qualify as the public hearing? Just some way in which we engage students or create that opportunity um, within the limitations that Amy correctly pointed out about busy teachers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's another really good idea. We'll go back to our DOE colleagues and explore a little bit more. And there might also be opportunities here to go back to Murad's earlier point about involving CBOs, right? That there are a lot of youth serving CBOs who might want to participate in this. So we'll try to get a better read on timing and see how we could adjust it to involve more participation.
I think we can also tap into the SYEP program as well.
Right.
Yeah. And just as a reminder, we did have similar stakeholder roundtables for the methodology. They were not part of the public hearing, but it was an opportunity to hear from community members on the methodology and challenges to voting. So I think there's room for that as well again this year.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder, Francis. That's a really great point.
Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to say again, if you would like to make comment in the public comment period, we just passed the noon time. We can give you a few minutes now if you would like to say anything, if you're a member of the public in the last half hour of the meeting. Just drop your name into the chat or text. I text the number 646-763-2189. Thank you. And I think we could go to the next slide.
Thanks, Sarah. I can take it from here. Hi, everyone. Julie, advisor on poll site language services and voter participation. Wanted to give you all an update on the special election that happened in Assembly District 60 on February 15th. It was actually our first time that we served as a special election. In order for us to service a special election, the poll site would have to be an existing one that we served in either the primary or the general previously. So for this site, we did service 6 voters, and we did have 2 new questions that we added to the interpretation logbook. So the interpreters would ask voters that they assisted, and they were, 1, is the voter a first-time voter, and 2, how did the voter learn about the poll site interpretation services? It was kind of a pilot, but we are hoping to add these questions to the primary and the general election going forward as part of what the interpreters can ask the voters, and just trying to get a bit more information on who we are servicing. So none of the 6 voters were first-time voters, and in terms of how they learned about the services, it was majority of them learned about, I mean, pretty much all of them actually either saw a sign near the poll site, or the BOE asked us for assistance. We had one voter who the BOE asked for assistance directly. Another kind of new thing about this program is that for the first time, we were able to have our outreach team go out and actually try to do some outreach prior to the special election on the ground. So we connected with some local community leaders. We met with our LAC member, Maria, who works on with Russian communities citywide, to give us some insight in Starrett City. And so we had a day of postering at the local library, senior centers, supermarkets, and the pharmacy nearby. We also connected with the elected officials on the ground, as well as postered and connected with the residential buildings around the poll site. And then this was a flyer that we had available and used to poster. It was also translated into Russian, and we also circulated it on our social media as well. Next slide.
I just want to make a note on the last slide, which is I want to commend the team for thinking through the outreach plan in this special election, because I think it gave us sort of a foundation to build on for the rest of the outreach. As we all told you last time, our outreach team is growing. So we're trying to think about ways that we build out outreach strategy. And I think this was like a great test piloting opportunity for us to start building that outreach strategy for poll site, going forward into the June primary. So thank you to the team for all the great work.
Yeah, Dr. Said, I did a hands clap during that. I want to second that. And also just to say to my fellow commissioners, this is all, it builds on itself. So while 6 voters were serviced in a very small election group, the outreach really helps build for the next one and then the next one. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, that's part of the plan. As you know, we are going to continue to be at a lot of these poll sites moving forward. So the relationships that we build now, I think we can continue to build upon in the upcoming elections. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the Language Assistance Advisory Committee. We had our kickoff event on February 17th, where we had a couple of speakers. We had Councilmember Shahana Hanif, the Executive Director of the Office of Community Ethnic Media, Jose Bayona, and our very own Murad was also a speaker. And so through that meeting, it was a chance for all the Language Assistance Advisory Committee members to meet, as well as kind of discuss kind of our upcoming plans coming forward. And just a couple of days ago, we had our March monthly meeting, and that was more focused on data. We started off the meeting with a presentation. So we are planning to start each presentation off with a LAC member introducing their community, the language community that they represent, as well as some of the outreach strategies that they've used in the past or would like to share with the group. So we actually had kind of coming off of the Assembly District 60 special election, Maria Mark, a LAC member, present on the Russian language communities and some of the strategies that we used. And then we went into looking at the utilization of the poll site data. So for the last 3 elections, presenting it to our members so that they can have a better understanding of all the different poll sites that we service, as well as what the utilization numbers were looking for those. And then building off of that, we then took a look at our poll site methodology in terms of how we choose our poll sites. And as Francis mentioned previously, we are going to be having a look at our methodology and preparing some revisions, looking into it and having a public presenting it to the commissioners soon, and then also having a public hearing on it. So we wanted to make sure that the LAC members had a chance to look at the methodology as well and started brainstorming a bit on any questions that they had and things that we should consider as we look through the methodology for the upcoming months. And then in terms of what's coming up for the LAC, we have in April and May, in advance of the June primary election, we are hoping to work with them in April to plan with our outreach team that we have our outreach staff to think through some of the community engagement planning processes that we want to put into place, any upcoming events that they may want to invite us to, or any opportunities for us to, let folks know about the poll sites that are in that district. And then in May, hoping to actually be out on the ground to execute some of the planning of the outreach events and strategies and media media goals that we have for that month. And then in June, we'll be kind of, executing the entire pulse site program in that month. So those are kind of the upcoming thoughts, upcoming plans for the LAC. Any questions, or does anyone have anything that they want to ask?
I think we're good. I don't see anyone's hands. So I think we're good on this. Thank you, Julie. Community boards.
Alrighty. Good afternoon, commissioners and staff. Just a quick update on our most recent workshops with the community boards. As was mentioned back in January, we started a partnership with Public Agenda, which is a nonpartisan research and public engagement organization, very similar to us in that they're also dedicated to strengthening democracy and also increasing civic participation. We held our first workshop on last week, Monday in the Bronx, and last night was in Manhattan. The numbers were a little bit disappointing, despite the amount of outreach that we did. So I want to give a big shout out to my colleagues, Samira and Drashti, for assisting in cold calling, emails, attending district service cabinet meetings. I attended the Brooklyn Borough Board meeting where I also announced the workshops. In the Bronx, we had a total of 27 participants. Last night, we had a total of 32 in Manhattan. The initial discussions that I had with many of the DMs and chairs in the Bronx, the consistent response that I got and is that community board members are zoomed out. They're just tapped out. There's a big appetite for going to in-person meetings. And I think that's information that's very vital for us as we start to really think about the future workshops. I think it's important that since community boards will be it looks like more than likely they will be going back to in-person meetings in April, that some of these workshops moving forward will be in person as well. We started initial conversations with the Center for Urban Pedagogy on some of their land use workshops, and they're actually going to start their in-person land use workshops in the summer. So we started initial conversations with them to see if we could bring some of those workshops to the Bronx and Manhattan, take that stuff out of Brooklyn and see if we could bring it to the outer boroughs. But there's a real big appetite for in-person meetings. The other piece that we need to also consider is more than likely there will be a hybrid model. I don't think virtual meetings or virtual workshops are a thing of the past once we go back to in-person. So I think moving forward, maybe having discussions with our vendors and partners where instead of having a 2-hour workshop, maybe having a pre-recorded workshop where it's 45 minutes, maybe an hour, and that's something we can share or we can share with each of the community board offices or have it on our city share website where members can then log in and see the workshops. But myself and the team, we're gonna do some extensive outreach this week for Queens, which is next week, Monday, and also for Brooklyn and Staten Island. Go back to doing some cold callings. I have a couple of district service cabinet meetings that I will be attending in Queens and for Brooklyn. Really get the word out, get folks to join the workshops. It was really neat about these particular workshops is that Public Agenda updated some of their slides to really help community boards now that more than likely they will be going back to in-person community board meetings to sort of reimagine how they re-engage with their constituents. Really just some thoughtful ideas about how to create a safe space with all COVID-19 protocols in place. So some really good, useful tips. That's a major emphasis that I will be emphasizing to the DMs and the board chairs to really take into consideration. And public agenda is going to open up some seats for Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island for any community board members that in Manhattan and the Bronx that were not able to attend. So they're going to open up some seats for those two boroughs so we could get as much maximum participation as possible. So that's my update. Any questions, concerns, ideas?
Andy, it's Mark. I confess that I don't think I saw a flyer for this, and I'm on Community Board 7 in Manhattan. So I'm not sure where that lies. I do have a couple of thoughts. One of which is that even if I had seen the flyer last night, was a critical meeting with respect to Riverside Park that forms the entire western boundary of my district, so I had to be at that anyway. I wonder whether, I don't know the extent to which the borough presidents are part of this outreach. Manhattan's borough president, well, the last borough president ran 17 separate trainings for community board members, most of which were fantastic and well attended. So I don't know that I accept, without having heard it before, your note that folks are done with Zoom. The demographic of my board is such that there's a lot of trepidation about returning to being in person. And of course, I think, as you probably know, there are serious limitations on what government can and can't do in terms of COVID protocols and protections in an in-person meeting. We can't, for example, even ask you if you're vaccinated, let alone deny you access. I learned recently we also can't require you to wear a mask, even though that didn't seem like a HIPAA thing. Anyway, so one thought that I might share about a future thing, at least in Manhattan, it's my understanding that the 4th and 5th weeks of the month are easier than the first 3 or 4 because the meetings tend to be on the first Tuesday or the first Thursday or whatever. So the last week of the month for most of the boards in Manhattan, as I understand it, not a scientific survey, but I've been doing this a while, might have a better chance. And if this was in partnership with the borough president, which is the provider of training that we're used to seeing, then it might get more traction and be viewed in the way that you want it to be. Anyway, and in the last point about pre-recorded, I think the idea of one of the things that the Manhattan Borough President did in the most recent rounds of trainings was to limit it to an hour. It's sort of like a lunchtime thing where you can take an hour at lunch and not have to devote 2 or 3 hours to something. I think that's a really good idea. So your 45-minute program sounds like it's right on the money there. Pre-recorded, I think, would be even harder to get folks because we'll all say, sure, we'll do it. But you know, in the push-pull of continuing education obligations, that may get lost in the shuffle. But anyway, I hope that's in some way useful.
No, absolutely. And we definitely did reach out to the borough president's offices to help us with amplifying the community board flyer. I mean, the flyer. I know there's a slew of new folks over at Manhattan BP. So I did touch base with Tricia Shiomura, who's the new community board director, and she's fully aware of the flyer. Athena Moore was super helpful as well because she oversees the Northern Manhattan community boards. So we were able to make those inroads. But you know, I'm gonna start getting, as soon as this meeting is over, getting on the horn and reaching out to the Manhattan district managers and kind of get their take on the workshop and what are their thoughts, and see how we can learn from this and see how we could, you know, make this the most practical way moving forward.
Andy, I just wanted to jump in here. This is Donna. I'm in actually probably the same area or the same consensus with Mark, because I had no idea that this was happening. And I think this is the second time. So I don't know if the fault is with the DM or just outreach or whatever. But I feel like, Mark, if we get on board with the board president's office, and because some of this training is the same. So it's an overlay of something that has already happened or things like that. So I think that the notification and letting us know that it's happening is a really good thing. And like Mark says, most of our meetings is the first 3 weeks of the month. The last week of the month, we usually just have like an executive meeting. So that last week is usually empty for other things, because last night I had a committee meeting, so I couldn't join. So, these things may be something for you to think about when you're making these schedules. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, the flyer was created late January, and we started emailing all the DMs in January, early February. I know for Community Board 7 in Manhattan, I believe the DM is leaving. Is it Michelle George, I believe, and so she had connected me with the acting district manager, Maxwell. Um, and Donna, which
We
community
just
board?
call him Max.
Max, yeah. So yeah, I touched
Uh,
base with Max.
Vicky,
Yeah,
can we actually, I want to keep us moving on time. I
absolutely.
think we need to make sure that Francis, when you send the email to commissioners, please attach this flyer so that they can help circulate it to board members that they know. As you mentioned, Andy, people can still sign up, even if they're from the Bronx and Manhattan. They can still sign up for Queens. They could still sign up for Brooklyn and Staten Island. So there's still time for us to get people who may be interested, and I also encourage the commissioners, if you're able to make those dates and you want to see what the trainings are about. If you're a community board member, if you're not a community board member, it's a great way to just like learn more about what Public Agenda is working on with our board members. So let's make sure we add the flyer so that you could help us promote it with board members you may know. And also, I think going forward, whenever we have trainings, let's just make sure that the commissioners know so they could help us reinforce the outreach. And I think we have one more slide to go through with you before we open up for comment. We wanted to share that we've been meeting with the borough presidents, the new borough presidents, to introduce ourselves, since so much of our work dovetails with what they're doing with the boards and just community engagement broadly. So far, we have met with borough presidents Reynoso and Gibson, and we have meetings coming up with Mark Levine and Borough President Casella to be scheduled. But basically what we're talking about in these meetings, and this applies to, I'm sure all of the commissioners who are borough president appointees know this, the terms that you had for serving on the commission are expiring soon. So we're trying to make everyone aware, and I think everyone is aware by this point, since everyone's new, that they need to think about how they're appointing officials to serve on the CEC commission. So I encourage you also, if you're not already in touch with your borough presidents, if you are a BP appointee, to please do that. So that's one thing we're talking with them about. And then substantively from our program point of view, talking with them about the variety of things we're doing, including community board trainings. And they've all said that they will help us do outreach to members for the trainings. And we talked with them about citywide participatory budgeting, how they might like to be involved in that, as well as, our intention to work with all different entities in citywide PB, including community-based organizations and community boards. So we started talking with them about that. And then for pole site language assistance, we inform them about the variety of languages we're serving in and in their boroughs, so that we could work with them on outreach for pole site services as well. And then voter engagement. It started to talk with them about what they'd like to see in that space. And also told them about the participatory budgeting processes that we were running in the past years with the youth as well as in the tree neighborhoods. So we're just, looking again to build stronger partnerships and collaborations with borough presidents, and looking forward to completing the meetings. We had met with Borough President Richards in the past, and that's why you don't see Queens here in coming up. But we're trying to stay in touch with the borough presidents on a variety of things we're working on. So Mark, that's your eyesight is fine. I hope I just answered your question about the Queens meeting. So any questions or comments on the meetings that we're just talking about?
Andy, just one quick question. Did I understand it correctly? You have to have a city account to log into in order to view these tape recorded meetings?
You do, but there is a mechanism that we can work with Do It where board members can log on to the city share through a backend site or link. We had those initial discussions with Do It, and there is a way for board members to have access to the site. Now all community board offices have it directly on their desktop, but that's a feature we would have to work with Do It on creating a backend.
Okay, and just to put out there again for the commission, we've talked about this before, but I think it is important for us to start to think about how we reach out to the public and start to make workshops available for the public and how they might become educated in dealing with the process of the community boards and their elected officials as well. But we've talked about this before, I know, with Mark and Donna and some other commissioners about land use issues in particular. The language, the vocabulary, the concepts are quite difficult to comprehend on many levels and to speak that language. So just putting out there again, if we could begin to think about just public workshops, and I know Los Angeles does this, so it's not uncommon for other municipalities to do this.
Yeah, if you could share any information you have, just if you could email me about the LA trainings. And also I'm seeing that Mark put a note in the chat saying that the trainings that are available to board members are also available to the public, especially those contemplating applying for appointment. So that's something we could keep in mind for our CD member trainings as well. That's a really interesting point. So yeah, and we've been talking about how we can do more public education workshops with civic engagement, right? And are developing kind of a civics 101 deck that we could share with, in different spaces. I actually did a civics 101 presentation recently with We Are All New York fellowship that the Jewish Community Relations Council runs. So that was really great, to share with them a variety of civic engagement opportunities and just sort of provide an overview of how city government works. So we're going to definitely be hoping to build that out a little bit more. And it's very aligned with everything we've been saying so far, in terms of working on the curriculum for students and the curriculum for participatory budgeting. It's all interwoven together. So thanks for that feedback. And now I'm gonna actually, since it's a little like 12:30, so I will turn it over to the community for public comment. I think we had one person who has signed up so far for public comment, and it was so I'd like to call on, I hope I'm not saying your name incorrectly, but correct me, Metternich Clemens. Are you still here?
Yeah, I am. I'm just trying to get my camera going. I think
Okay,
it should be good here. And people can't see me, right? Obviously, no, right?
not yet.
Oh, sorry. Uh, yeah, I don't know what's going on. Seems a little, but it's okay. Yeah, I just wanted to. My name is Manish Kamans. Good afternoon, I guess.
Yeah, good
Um,
afternoon.
commissioners. Yeah, I just want to introduce my organization. It's called SELA, and we are a research center that is dedicated to treating public sentences as objects, which means that we don't take our public language for granted. We don't take public sentences for granted. We feel they're objects, and like any other object, they have properties, and those properties can be studied. And that means that we study public sentences, the sentences that people use every day to talk about civil society. And we study what makes a sentence meaningful, what kinds of properties a sentence has, and how can we best use them to achieve the things that we want. And our goal is to use our research to improve the way public discourse is done within our civil society. And we think that if different kinds of issues only include certain kinds of sentences to talk about them, then we think that civil society can get better, because a lot of the times an issue isn't talked about appropriately, and then that leads to a lot of confusion, and then bad public policy develops in the way bad public language used to talk about an issue. So we developed a number of kinds of tools that people can use to test a sentence for certain kinds of properties. And really, we're talking to a lot of different commissions, different civic bodies, community boards, even some small political parties. And we're trying to encourage them to adopt the attitude that every sentence that you encounter within your public experience, you can test that sentence for certain kinds of properties like accountability, consistency, empirical relevance, cultural consistency, cultural relevance, accountability, stuff like that. And you can judge the meaningfulness of a sentence that is used in our everyday civil experience, depending on the kinds of properties it has. And we feel as if the public has this attitude that every single sentence you encounter has these kinds of properties, then it will be really easy to tell whether somebody's speaking responsibly on the issue or not. And public policy that develops from our public discourse can be better. So a little complicated. There's some like logic involved and like a focus on language. But we want to encourage your commission as you're doing your work to sort of think in this area, to kind of in your civic engagement, think about trying to encourage the public to think about public language in this manner, and getting people to sort of think to themselves, all right, well, you're saying something to me. Your sentence has properties. What kinds of properties does your sentence has? Can I hold your sentence accountable? Does your sentence tell me its implications? Are there other sentences that I am expected to accept if I accept your sentence as meaningful? Is your sentence consistent? Does your sentence abide by my cultural norms? Stuff like that. And we think that, again, if people have this kind of attitude, a lot of the sentences that are in our discourse that make civil existence miserable for a lot of people will realize that they don't have good properties, and so they shouldn't be part of our discourse, and all the public policy that's built on them is suspicious after that. So yeah, I'm going to put my contact information in the chat. I'm hoping that maybe I can talk to some of you outside of this, and I kind of do a little presentation on the work that we're doing later in the future. And thanks for listening to what I have to say.
Yep, that's really fascinating, actually. I'd love to learn more. You said your organization's called SELA? I didn't
Yeah,
get that.
I'm going to put in the chat right now.
Okay. Um,
Um, also, I didn't mention it, but we have a tool that we've been developing that people can use to check the properties their sentences have. It's called a language game. It's a system of rules. It's like a logic, essentially. And it's a very rigorous process that we use to generate sentences about civil society. So all the sentences that our organization generates about civil society, they're formal sentences, meaning they have to pass very specific kinds of rules. They have to demonstrate they have all kinds of properties and to entitle them to be used within any particular conversation. And anybody can use it to sort of ensure that a sentence has like basic good qualities to be used. You could also check it out on our website. But we're hoping that your commission thinks less data, less science, and more formality, right? Like you're not going to convince anybody using data, hopefully, when you move away from that and you think more about, my sentence demonstrates these kinds of things. That's why you should take my sentence seriously, not because I have data or science, but because my sentence, you can hold me accountable for what I'm saying. I'm being honest about what I'm saying, and I can prove it through this formal scheme. So yeah, hopefully, that's something that you guys take into consideration, and looking forward to working for you throughout the rest of the year.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing this information. I'll definitely be looking at it and trying to learn more, and happy to talk with you more. I don't know if anyone else on in the commission had heard about this before. It sounds really fascinating. Did you have a comment, Chuck? Or no?
I'm sorry, no.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
Sarah, if I
Yeah.
might,
Yeah,
is
please go ahead.
just one thing. I noticed that the commission often sends out emails on Friday evening,
Hmm.
and I don't know why exactly you're choosing to do that, but just from what I know in sending out uh, communications to community members and larger groups, Friday night is not a great time. That email is often not seen when it comes in and not picked up on Monday or on the weekend. So I'd just like to put out there maybe to look at a Tuesday morning or different timing, whatever analytics you have, I think would point to Friday evening is not a great time.
Thank you, Amy. That's really helpful feedback. Um, Anyone else? Feel free to just speak, because I cannot see everyone's, whether you're raising your hand or not. So between now, just to go through the schedule, our next public meeting is supposedly, well, it's scheduled for May 24th. I think what we need to do is figure out internally whether we're going to move the public hearing a little bit earlier on the age rule. So we'll talk with internally about that and get back to you. And then between now and then, we would love to get your help on just perhaps getting more people to sign up for the March 28th training for community boards, and then April 4th, Brooklyn, Staten Island. Again, anyone from, any borough can attend those. So we'll share the flyer with you and be in touch. Am I leaving anything out? Does anyone have anything else they want to discuss? Any commissioners?
Sorry to keep chiming in, but
No, please. That's what we're here for.
one of the things, I know it's not under our purview, but just to make everyone aware, the election districts have also changed. We
Yeah.
talked a little bit about, the districting, both federal and state, that has changed, but our EDs have changed. And I think this is going to be a bit of an issue at the polls. For those who don't know their ED, it's not going to be an issue because they'll just inquire about where they're going. But for years, it's been the same ED. So you're going to have voters who think they know exactly what table to go to. And it's not going to be there, or their name is not going to be there. So I just wanted to point this out to the commission, if there is a way that we could help through our different language assistants, and also to follow up with the BOE and the Board for Campaign Finance, also what they're planning on doing, because I think there does need to be some outreach around this issue.
Yeah, and you also reminded me that we are going through council level redistricting as well. And that will impact, because all the council members who were just elected will be up for re-election next year because of the council redistricting. So perhaps maybe we could do have a presentation maybe on redistricting, and including at the council level in the next meeting.
This is going to be really confusing to our voters, our
Yeah.
community members. It's a lot of shifting right now, and people just feel a little overwhelmed with what's happening and don't understand it. So any help that we can provide, I think, would be great.
Oh, thank you. Donna, you had put something in the chat, education.
Yeah, well, to Amy's point, I
Oh,
feel
okay.
like we
Yes.
need to educate all of our constituents and the whole of New York City about this, because a lot of people don't even know that it has happened, and a lot of people are very confused, and it's going to be chaotic. So I don't know if BOE is planning on, distributing information about that, or when they mail the cards to the voters, if that information is going to be on the card. But I think some kind of public education on that would be very helpful, and it's a good way for us to get recognized and to be engaged in civic engagement. Sorry for using the word engage twice.
Does anyone else on the team or on the call know anything about education that might be happening around redistricting? We can look it up and talk to colleagues, but I just wanted to see if anyone else knew.
No, and thank you, Donna, for chiming in as well. But I think the other thing is we've learned anything from ranked choice voting. The BOE is too late in the game with their education and their flyering, way too late. So if there's anything that we could do, to Donna's point, to lead this process, to lead educating our electorate, I think it would be great for the Civic Engagement Commission to do that. It would really show that we are concerned about these issues and not waiting for other agencies.
If I could jump in on that in full agreement and hopefully to add something to it. It's not just that your ED may change, your polling place may change. With redistricting, they're likely to, depending on where those lines are drawn in the council level, it's already creating confusion. We're in the middle of petitioning right now for federal and state offices, and I'll avoid the war stories and simply say that voters voters that are willing to stop are confused, and these are hardcore people who don't miss an election. When the city council lines get redrawn, it may be even more so, more confusing. And we sort of have a dual mission here to make sure that the people who are used to voting know where to go, and to try to encourage those who aren't used to voting to become those folks. This process threatens both populations differently but equally. And so I agree with Amy that this ought to be something that we try to be a leader on. And I have no confidence that, well, I shouldn't put it that way. I would welcome BOE as a partner, but I think we should be the leader.
Murad, is New York Immigration Coalition active in this space? And I can't see if you're still on the call. Just educating people about redistricting. Is Murad still here?
think Murad
I think he
dropped off.
hopped
Oh,
off.
he had to leave. Okay. Okay, well, thank you for raising this. And we will also try to find out what's happening in this space. And I think Laura also had to go to another meeting. So, um,
If I could just,
yeah,
before we end,
Michael.
just picking up on what Amy and Mark have said, can you find out what City Hall wants to do in terms of reorganizing or restructuring the Board of Elections? If there's going to be any reform in terms of not just registering people to vote, but managing an election properly, somebody has to take the lead, and I would hope it would be City Hall, uh, if not some people within the council. But I think that is the first step in rehauling the whole voting participatory process, is fixing the Board of Elections. And I know it involves Albany. It will involve the state legislature because they have to rule in terms of commissions. And if we're going to try to impact greater voter participation and lower the frustration level at the polls, which then turns down and lowers voter participation on the next election, it has to begin with blowing up the Board of Elections. I'm as simply as blunt as that. But I'd like to know what the city position is going to be on that, if they're serious about it.
Um, thank you for that. We will try to follow up and ask more about that. I'm not sure. We haven't gotten any indication about that question yet. So we can certainly ask. And I think in the meantime, we have to, we are working with the Board of Elections on trying to make sure that we are coordinated in our poll site operations for language assistance, to work with them closely on that. So there's a lot that we have to do to improve in that area, and also just I think work together to better serve voters for sure.
Sarah,
So
I understand the partnership need on the part of the CEC, but I also understand the need for us to be a leader, to speak out and try to suggest a conversation should begin about making it more responsive.
yeah, agreed. Um, so thank you, Michael, for bringing that up. That's really helpful. Um, let's see. Anyone else? We have about 10 minutes left. We could,
Sarah, would
yeah.
it be out of line to ask Senator Myrie to present to the commission about the hearings that he held last summer and the findings that that they came up with, and some of the recommendations that they're making, and also what they have yet to solve for that is on their radar that needs that isn't an issue?
That's I don't see a problem. I mean, we've invited people to come and present. I personally, I don't see an issue with that, but we can ask about it and say that that's an interest of the commissioners to learn more about the legislation, right? I think that's part of just educating people about what the issues are, what people are concerned with, and so we can look into that a little bit more.
I know that those hearings were quite eye-opening for many of the senators and many of the people in the room. So it would be good for this commission, I think, to know what poll workers, general population, and voters, and what concerns are out there. I think it would be really great for us to know.
Good idea.
It's absolutely. I think we all know poll workers, but having the results of a hearing that can summarize and consolidate those experiences would be more effective. I agree with my colleagues. I'm not sure I want us to wade into the deep waters of trying to propose the fix to this, because we have work to do in terms of the success of the outreach. And I would hate to get us mired in what is inevitably a political conversation. Not that we're apolitical here, but first and foremost, simple education is mission appropriate to us. So.
Um, Thanks for that. I mean, I think we all agree there's so much work to do for sure. And thinking about what are our charter mandated duties is always a place that I begin because I think, um, for me, there's a huge, the big challenge for me is just where we are, in democracy as a process and trying to see how we make inroads. And so that problem to me is very big and very thorny. And the mission that we've been given to increase civic trust to me is also a big mandate. And so that's why I just go straight to like, okay, what is a charter telling me to do so that at least I can be in legal compliance with what New Yorkers have said they wanted the commission to do. And I think, all of these questions that are being raised here are fundamentally about what keeps people participating, right? What are the ways in which the systems and processes aren't working, and how do we continue to improve that? So they're interrelated questions, and we will definitely follow up on the questions that you've raised here and try to get some answers. And as always, really appreciate the feedback that people provide in these conversations. Francis, do you want to say something about, I understand that the team had a conversation with CFB about redistricting education.
Yeah, I know that Laura has hopped off, but we did have a conversation last week with the Campaign Finance Board to try to coordinate on public education, specifically on voter engagement, the upcoming primary election. Of course, our focus as a commission of pulse language assistance is on how we can reach LEP voters, but I think we left off with a conversation on how we can also touch on redistricting. So thinking through like a civics 101 classes, workshops. So we'll share more details in the coming weeks on how that will turn out our joint partnership with CFB.
Thank you so much for that, Francis. Yeah, for the redistricting and the council redistricting and the new council members running again, I think it's going to be the second round of ranked choice voting as well in 2023. So there's going to be a lot happening, that we need to be in addition to if the municipal voting, like will be going into effect, right? Like pretty soon. So yes, I agree with that expression. A lot happening in the voting space. Yeah, a lot of changes.
So are there going to be are there going to be minutes to this meeting that include some of the contact information from the people who presented, or I have their contact also, but I just wanted to know. Are there going to be minutes for this meeting? I think there are, right? They usually are minutes, right?
We post the videos publicly.
Okay, gotcha. That's
Yeah,
fine.
and it's also being live streamed right now, so you will have access to that, and you can also be in touch with us. You provided your contact info in the chat. There,
Yeah, I did.
yeah,
Oh, but
yeah,
if it's posted, then that's fine. I can just click the video. That's fine. Thank you.
yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so we should have a transcript posted in the next couple 24, 48 hours. So everything will be up there, including the presentation deck.
Thank you so much. So if there's no other additional issues or comments, we can, adjourn. So if there are no additions, do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so the motion to adjourn has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Thanks for a good meeting.
Yeah, any opposed?
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, great. So the motion passes and I'm calling this meeting to adjourn. See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Which may be in person. We'll keep you posted.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.